There are moments in life when a quiet unease settles deep within the heart, soft ripples beneath the surface that we often try to silence. These are not mere coincidences or fleeting doubts, but gentle warnings placed by God's hand, tender markers meant to guide us away from paths that would steal our peace. It can feel lonely to carry such whispers, as if the world pushes us to look away, to dismiss what feels like caution or fear. Yet in this sacred space of stillness, you are deeply seen and known. The restless stirring inside you is not a burden, but an invitation to pause and listen with the soul. In the quiet, God's voice comes like a steady light, calling us beyond distraction and confusion, toward a place where truth and peace dwell. Today's reflection holds space for those hidden signs you may have felt but set aside, not to accuse or overwhelm, but to gently unfold a deeper understanding. Here you will find the courage to honor the warnings whispered by your spirit, and the grace to receive them as a divine embrace. This message is for the heart that carries quiet questions, for the soul wearied by uncertainty, and for the spirit longing for rest. As you listen, may you discover that these red flags are not walls but doorways, sacred invitations from God leading you toward healing, clarity, and a peace that surpasses all understanding. You are not alone in this journey, you are held and cherished beyond measure. There is a quiet voice within that often goes unnoticed, a still, persistent whisper that lingers long after the noise of the day has faded. It is not loud or demanding, but soft and steady, like the gentle rustling of leaves stirred by a calm breeze. This voice carries a message from the Spirit, a sacred reminder that something within is not at peace. It is the heart's way of signaling that the path we are on is tangled with shadows, and that true rest cannot be found where turmoil takes root. This inner unrest can feel uncomfortable, even painful. It nags quietly, refusing to be silenced by distractions or hurried thoughts. It is a subtle invitation to pause, to lean into the stillness where God's peace might be found. The Apostle Paul spoke of this peace as a guard, one that surrounds the heart and mind when we place our trust in Christ. It is a peace that does not simply quiet the storms outside, but calms the tempest within. To ignore this whisper is to step away from the shelter God offers, leaving the heart vulnerable to confusion and despair. Often the world encourages pushing through the unease, telling us to work harder, to dismiss feelings of doubt or discomfort as weakness. But the Spirit's voice is different. It asks for our attention, not to burden us, but to protect us. It calls us to rest from striving and to seek the gentle presence of God who understands every ache and every fear. When the heart aches with unrest, it is not a sign of failure, but a sacred signal that something precious needs care. This voice is a gift, a divine compass that turns us away from paths that would lead to harm and toward the quiet places where God dwells. It invites a trust that goes deeper than circumstances or appearances. The heart learns to listen not to the chaos around, but to the steady promise that God's peace will stand guard, tender and sure. In this place of listening, the restless soul begins to find a stillness that heals. Sometimes pain returns again and again, like a quiet echo in the chambers of the heart. The same wounds, the same sorrows, seem to circle back without end. This repetition is not random or meaningless, but a gentle reflection held up by the hand of God's grace. It is as if God places a mirror before us, inviting us to look closely at the patterns that keep us bound. These cycles, though painful, carry a hidden message, an invitation to pause, to see where the heart has been caught in the same snare. There is deep kindness in this invitation, even in the midst of suffering. God does not desire for us to live captive to the same hurts or to wander lost in the familiar ache of old wounds. Instead, he calls us to recognize the truth that lies beneath the surface. Jesus spoke of this truth as a path to freedom, a light that breaks the chains and opens the way to new life. The pattern once seen can no longer hold its power in the dark. When brought into the light of God's love and honesty, it begins to unravel. This process asks for courage, not the boldness of rushing forward, but the quiet strength to look within and acknowledge what has been hidden. Sometimes the repeated pain points to places where the heart has been wounded and has not yet received healing. Other times it shows where we have allowed fear or pride to keep us trapped, even when the door has been opened wide before us. Each return of pain is a sacred moment, a chance to listen more deeply to God's gentle voice inviting us to step into freedom. There is a peace in this breaking free, not because the pain disappears instantly, but because the heart begins to walk in truth. The truth that God is with us, that His love does not fail, and that no cycle is too strong for His grace to break. In the stillness of this realization, the soul begins to breathe again, and the weight of repetition gives way to the hope of new beginnings. The mirror no longer shows only the old wounds, but also the face of a heart learning to trust the God who sets captives free. There are moments when silence weighs heavier than any spoken word, and its quiet presence fills the spaces between hearts. This silence is not empty, it carries the absence of love, the absence of truth, and the absence of honesty. Sometimes the stillness between two souls is louder than any argument or harsh noise.
It is in this silence that the heart feels the deepest ache, a hollow place where connection should have been but was not. Such silence can feel like a slow pressing weight, pressing in and holding tight. Yet within this stillness God's voice may be heard most clearly. When the noise of the world falls away, when words fail and barriers rise, the Spirit gently speaks in the quiet. The psalmist reminds us that the Lord draws near to those who are broken-hearted, that he is close to those crushed in spirit. This nearness in silence is not distant or absent, it is tender and real. It is a divine presence, a comfort that does not rush but stays beside the soul, offering a place to rest and begin to heal. The weight of silence can be a sacred signal. It calls us to attention, not to push it away or fill it with noise, but to enter it with open hands and a quiet heart. This silence is not a void but a holy space where healing begins. It invites the broken places to surface, to be seen and held by the gentle love of God. The absence of words can reveal truths that speech might hide, truths about longing, pain and the deep need for grace. In this silence the soul is given room to breathe, to mourn and to listen. It becomes a sacred pause where the Spirit moves gently, whispering peace to the restless heart. The quietness between the noise holds a promise that even when love feels distant, God's presence is near, and healing can begin in the places where words fall short. The silence is not a sign of abandonment, but an invitation to encounter a love that speaks softly, yet powerfully in the stillness. There comes a time when the soul grows weary, a deep exhaustion settling in that cannot be shaken by rest or distraction. It is a weariness that seeps beneath the surface, dimming the light that once burned bright within. Yet even in this place of fatigue the feet continue to run, pushed by a restless urgency or the weight of expectation. This running beyond strength is a soft warning from God, a tender call to slow down and listen to the body and soul alike. When boundaries are ignored and limits are overstepped, the heart begins to fray and the spirit grows faint. This exhaustion is not a sign of failure, but a sacred invitation to pause and receive a different kind of strength. The psalmist reminds us that God does not call us to carry burdens alone or to run endlessly on our own power. Instead, he offers a gentle promise to give power to the faint and increase strength where there is none. This strength is not fleeting or conditional, but a steady wellspring that flows from his faithful presence. The fatigue felt deep inside is not something to be brushed aside or overcome by sheer will. It is an invitation to lean fully into God's arms, to rest not only in physical stillness but in spiritual surrender. The soul's weariness becomes a sacred space where renewal can begin, when the heart stops striving and begins to trust the quiet power of God's care. It is in this surrender that the light within can be rekindled, glowing once again with the warmth of hope and peace. Continuing to run when the soul is exhausted only leads to further dimming and distance from the source of true life. But when the heart hears this soft warning and chooses to rest, a deeper strength rises up. This strength carries not only through the days ahead, but anchors the soul in a peace that endures beyond any circumstance. It is the strength of God's faithful presence, offered freely to those who stop running and simply come home to him. There is a quiet sorrow in the fading of joy, a subtle shifting where what once delighted the heart now feels heavy or dull. This loss does not often announce itself with loud alarms but moves softly, like a shadow crossing over the warmth of sunlight. Joy is a gift from God, a reflection of his presence within the soul. When that gift begins to wane, it signals a gentle stirring from the spirit, calling the heart to seek something deeper, something purer. This fading joy is not a sign of failure or weakness. It is a tender invitation to turn back to the living water that Jesus promised, water that never runs dry, water that refreshes and renews the soul beyond any earthly pleasure or comfort. The living water speaks to a wellspring within, a source that fills every longing and quiets every thirst. When joy slips away, it points us not to loss, but to the presence of Christ waiting to fill the emptiness with his endless love. The journey to reclaim this joy is not one of striving but of resting and receiving. It is found in the quiet moments where the soul opens itself to God's gentle touch, allowing his peace to wash over the places that have grown dry. Jesus' promise stands firm: whoever drinks of this water will never thirst again. It is a promise rooted in grace and faithfulness, offering hope when the heart feels empty. This loss of joy, though painful, can be the beginning of a new awakening. It calls the soul to pause and listen, to drink deeply from the source of true life. In the fading of earthly delight, there is space made for something eternal to take root. The heart begins to understand that joy is not simply a feeling but a presence that cannot be taken away, only hidden when the soul turns away from its source. The Spirit's gentle prompting in these quiet moments is a sacred gift, a reminder that joy is never lost, but waiting to be found again in the loving arms of God. It is in this seeking that the soul is refreshed, and joy begins to rise once more, not from the world's shallow wells, but from the eternal springs of grace and truth. There is a deep ache that comes from feeling unseen, unheard, like a voice lost in the crowd, a presence unnoticed even by those closest to us. This feeling can settle quietly but heavily, pressing on the soul with a weight that is hard to shake. The pain of invisibility touches the core of our being, stirring loneliness and doubt. Yet, even when human eyes fail to notice, even when voices around us fall silent or dismissive, there is a gaze that never wavers. God sees us fully, knows us completely, and holds us tenderly in his sight. Long before the world knew our names, God knew us. Before life began, before breath was drawn, he formed us in love and intention. The words spoken through the prophet Jeremiah reveal this profound truth. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. This knowledge is not distant or abstract, but intimate and personal. It speaks of a God who sees beyond our pain, beyond our loneliness, and recognizes the preciousness of our soul when others cannot. This recognition invites a quiet trust, a resting in the truth that God's presence is constant and unwavering, even when human neglect seems overwhelming. It calls the heart to lean on something far greater than the fleeting approval or acknowledgement of others. When voices around us fail to affirm our worth, God's voice remains steady, whispering love and acceptance that never fades. In this space, the soul finds a refuge from the isolation of feeling unseen. The divine gaze meets us where we are, holding every hidden hurt and every silent cry. It is a sacred place where invisibility is transformed into belonging, and loneliness becomes the soil from which faith and hope can grow. Here, the heart is invited to rest in the assurance that no matter how quiet the world may seem, we are fully known and deeply loved by the one who formed us. Prayers whispered in the quiet of the heart can sometimes feel like they vanish into the silence. The words rise up with hope, longing for change, healing or comfort, yet the answers seem distant or absent. This silence can bring a heavy discomfort, as doubt quietly creeps in, and the soul wrestles with questions that have no easy answers. The gap between prayer and response is often a place of tension and waiting, where faith feels tested and the heart aches with uncertainty. Yet within this discomfort, there is a sacred space where God may be speaking in ways that transcend words and timing. The Lord's ways are higher than ours, and his thoughts rise far above human understanding. As the prophet Isaiah declares, God's purposes and plans are not bound by our expectations or desires. This truth does not lessen the pain of unanswered prayers, but invites a surrender deeper than the words spoken. It calls the soul to rest in the mystery of God's perfect timing and divine wisdom. The waiting itself becomes a form of prayer, a quiet offering of trust when answers remain unseen. It is in this surrender that faith grows stronger, not because the struggle disappears, but because the heart learns to lean on God's faithfulness rather than on immediate relief. The discomfort of unanswered prayers can become a sacred place, where God's presence feels closest, holding the soul gently through seasons of silence and doubt. This space between asking and receiving invites a new kind of listening, one that listens not only for answers but for the still small voice of God's love. It teaches patience, humility and trust, as the soul is drawn into deeper communion with the one who knows all things and holds all time in his hands. Though the prayers may seem unanswered for now, this quiet gap carries a promise that God's purposes are unfolding in ways unseen, and his grace will sustain the heart through every moment of waiting. There is a profound stillness that comes when the rushing ceases and the soul finally begins to listen. In the quiet that follows the running and the striving, a new clarity emerges, soft and gentle, yet unmistakable. It is the voice of God, not thunderous or overwhelming, but a whisper that moves through the heart like a gentle breeze. This is the place where true guidance begins, where the restless soul finds direction in the calm rather than the chaos. Elijah, weary and worn, stood on the mountain, expecting God to come in great power, in the earthquake, the fire, the wind. But God was not in those mighty displays. Instead, he came in the stillness, the gentle whisper that called Elijah back to himself and to his purpose. This moment reveals a deep truth. God's guidance often comes quietly, inviting us to slow down, to be present, and to receive his peace. Our red flags, the warnings and the unrest we might once have tried to flee, become sacred signals, marking the path away from confusion and fear, and toward rest. When the soul stops running, it begins to see these signs not as burdens but as gifts. Each hesitation, each moment of unease, is part of a divine conversation, a loving hand reaching out to redirect our steps toward healing and truth. The peace that follows is not a fleeting feeling, but a steady assurance that we are held and led by a God who knows our journey intimately. The voice that calls us is patient and kind, drawing us into a deeper trust and surrender. In this quiet clarity, the soul learns to walk with confidence, no longer pulled by the distractions of fear or doubt. The path may not always be clear at first, but the gentle whisper of God's presence lights the way step by step. This stillness, born from ceasing the endless running, holds a promise that when we listen, truly listen, we will find peace that surpasses understanding and guidance that never fails. In the quiet moments when we choose to stop and listen, God's gentle voice guides us away from confusion and into his peace. Those red flags we once tried to ignore become tender invitations to rest, to heal, and to trust in a love that never lets go. May you find comfort in knowing that every warning, every uneasy feeling, is held in the hands of a Father who sees you fully and leads you gently toward freedom. If this reflection has brought you a measure of peace, you are always welcome to join us here, where we seek to listen and grow together in grace. When you feel ready, you might choose to like this video or subscribe, so we can continue this journey of faith and healing side by side. Until then, may God's quiet presence surround you and bring you rest.